will tell you too that this is a recruiting trip. We're looking for institutions that want to work with us to pilot and to implement this outcome assessment program. We think there's good opportunity here to help people improve their curriculum, but we'd like to turn this into some publications, perhaps do some research about the implementation and show results, because this is something definitely worth sharing to other institutions. So if you're interested in improving your own programs, use this tool, that's great. If you want to work with us to maybe be part of a group effort to track the performance and the changes and then present this at conferences or maybe write a paper about it, that would be great. So again, I'm Dave Kleinfelter, the Chief Academic Officer here at the Learning House. And I'll share with you my colleagues. This is one where I'm not going to do much talking, but Anne-Marie Hodges is the Director of Distance Learning at Notre Dame College. They're in the process of getting implemented in this project. And then Carlene Sandburn is a faculty member at Friends University. Carlene has actually used this system on one of her classes that she taught this last term, and she's got the data to show how we assess the outcomes in her courses. So she's the real pioneer, first out of the chute with this program. And then Matt Cobb, our Vice President for Product Development, is the tool builder that makes this all work. So Matt will do his part of it. So Thomas Edison was one of the great inventors in American history. He invented the phonograph, telegraph, improved the telegraph. Any other things you know that Edison invented? Anybody help me out here? He had over 1,000 patents for his inventions. Light bulb was probably his number one, that he's most known for. And the second slide was supposed to be a picture of his light bulb. 1879. This light bulb looks a lot like the light bulbs that we use today, if you've seen it. And the thing about that light bulb was that he kept working and working to find the right filament. He ran electric current through this filament that would glow and give off light. The problem was they kept burning out. He couldn't get a filament that would stay lit very long. The first one that he actually got to light only lasted about an hour. And he hit on the idea of using carbon. So you take any plant material, you could turn it into carbon. And he went through 6,000 different types of carbon, carbon from plants and fibers all over the world to try to get one that would glow and stay longer than just an hour or so, until he finally got the one that was going to work, and it lasted about 15 hours, and then away we were. He used cotton to start with. The cotton carbon was the one that kind of got him going, so it was actually commercially usable and so forth. Today we use tungsten. And he actually thought about using tungsten, but didn't in his experiment. Well, the reason I wanted to get you thinking about Thomas Edison and his inventions and these 6,000 experiments, right, is he used the scientific method, discovery method, to figure out problems like this or to invent new devices to solve issues. So in the scientific method, you have independent variables and dependent variables. You're all with me, right? A lot of you folks did dissertations at one time in your life. You studied stats and so forth. The independent variables were the different kinds of carbon. He had 6,000 different independent variables. He tried one at a time. And the dependent variable in his case was he was trying to get this bulb to glow at a certain level of light for enough hours. And so he kept trying different independent variables to see if he could make that dependent variable do what he wanted it to do, if it would get the right effect, until he finally got carbon from cotton. We talk a lot about the science and the art of teaching, but it's mostly art, and there's very little science at this point about teaching itself and how people learn. We know things, for example, like time on task makes a difference. The more time you spend, which would be the independent variable, the more learning you get, the dependent variable. This is a process that we have, I think. It provides the tools for us to really apply the scientific method, just like Edison did, to how students learn. And in our case, The dependent variable that we want to see if we can move is student learning. And we define this. He had a light and so many hours of the kind of light he wanted. It's an outcome in a course or an outcome from a program. It's a learning outcome. And we define the outcome by some kind of an assessment. It could be an examination. It says we have an outcome that students will learn to the 9 principles of marketing. I don't know if there's 9 or not. But so you can have an outcome like that, but you have to translate it into some kind of measurable variable. So you say we're going to have an exam that measures the 9 outcomes. And if a student can pass the exam with 60%, we'll say yes, and away we go. So dependent variables then in this case are what you do as a faculty member or how we build the courses. Certain kind of textbooks, certain kind of learning activities, lectures, whatever you do, if you can make these things happen so that we can get better outcomes on this test. In this, the outcome could be measured by a written assignment, a paper, whatever you want. If it's those kinds of things, you need a good rubric to go with it so we can consistently measure it. You don't want your dependent variable here to get measured one way by this professor, and another way by this professor, and another one by this one. It's got to be reliable, and it's got to be valid. And then if we can make this move, if we can do things over here with these independent variables, and we can get results, if we can move the needle up, get better learning, more performance on this dependent variable, we're doing the same thing Thomas Edison did. And that's what this session is all about. So in our case, the dependent variable is going to be course outcomes. Many, many people set up their assessment systems, and I bet a lot of you folks have on your campuses, that you assess program outcomes. You have an outcome for a set of programs. Most of the accrediting bodies are focusing on programs. Program outcomes don't work. Anybody tell me why you can't use program outcomes to get good scientific results like this, or why they don't work? What? Yeah, that's the start. They're too general. You don't know which dependent variables had the effect. Exactly. See, so you got a program outcome, person might have taken, but you know better, right? Take on administrators. If you have 30 or 40 courses in a program, and so at the end, if you say, here's the program outcomes, our students met it, or they didn't meet it, or we had this kind of an effect, how do you know which dependent variable caused the impact? Was it course number 1, course number 2, course number 15? I don't know. Nobody knows. You can't draw the correlation back. If you get down to the course level, you can get it tight enough that there is an assessment that goes with that outcome, and you know what you taught in that course for that particular outcome. And so you can get it tight enough and close enough to really have a controlled experiment, or a real experiment like Thomas Edison did on the light bulb. So 2 things you have to have in place, and 2 ingredients for this system to work. And the first one is what we call master courses or standardized courses in the Learning House lingo. You have to write these courses so that you know that they're the same over and over. So standardized courses do a lot of nice things for us. They give us a uniform student experience. So if you have a student that took the course in the fall and one that took it in the spring, they had a similar experience. That's kind of nice to know. There's a quality control mechanism here that if 10 different people teach that course over time, you know that the students had a common experience. And so there's kind of a quality to it, and you can build courses in good factors into a course if you standardize it. It's also a good use of faculty talent, because some faculty are great at teaching, some are great at course design, and they're not always great at both of those things. So you can get faculty that are great course designers. Those are the ones you want designing the course, and the other people you want teaching it. But mostly you can get continuous improvement. If you standardize your courses, you can lock down these outcomes and the assessments of those outcomes and hold them constant. And that's the key here when you standardize this course. So the backward design process is what we use in our curriculum department to help you build courses. If we work together, you have a vision of a course, what this course looks like, where it fits in the program. But then the first really important task is the outcomes. What are we trying to cover in this course? And that's the hardest part. Many people skip over this, they kind of take it lightly, but you got to write these outcomes so that you really are getting at what's important for students to learn. And I've done some presentations and written some papers about how this course fits in the overall degree plan. There's a lot of things about that we could talk about. But this course needs to fit in with the next course and the next course and the next course so that the outcomes layer up and they reinforce and so forth. But you write those outcomes, get them done, and then as I said, you can't just write the outcomes, you have to know what's the evidence of that outcome. So in a sense, you translate the outcome into an assessment, an assignment of some type. It's a test, it's a paper, it's a presentation, it's a project at the end of a course, whatever that is. That's how you define that outcome as a real set of data or something that you can measure. And oftentimes, the assessment needs a rubric because you want to make sure that, again, all of us grade it the same way, we give it the same score. So you got to write a tight rubric that really defines success or the proper score on that assessment, all right? And then you go about finding learning resources that will help students meet the assessment. So you pick a textbook, you design a lecture, you record videos, whatever you do. There's millions of activities you can come up with to see what's going to help students learn the materials, they perform well on the assessment. So in the Thomas Edison example, these outcomes and the assessments that define them are the dependent variable. And we're not going to change those. That's why you want to standardize the course. If I teach it in the spring and I have one set of outcomes and Carlene teaches it in the next fall and she changes the outcomes, how do we compare to see if we're getting better or worse or how students are doing? You know for that one instance, but you can't track it over time. What are the dependent variables are these things. If you can hold the outcomes and the assessments constant, then Carlene can teach it her way, I'll teach it my way, we'll see which one does better. Or better yet, in your institution, you teach that course for a year, maybe 10 sections of it, different people teaching it. You capture all those results, and that's point number 2. You need a way to collect the data from student performance. So how many students passed each of those outcomes at what level? You collect all that data after a year, you look at it all and you say, you know, we're not doing very well, or our students aren't performing to the level we would like on outcomes 1 and 3. We're doing great. We're hitting 95% on the other outcomes in this course. Then you sit down as a faculty with your subject matter experts and you say, let's change this course. And you agree together, we're going to change these learning resources. When you do this, you'll find things like, you know, we introduced this topic too early in the course. The students weren't ready for it yet. Or simple things like, you know, the textbook chapter on this particular topic just isn't very good. We should supplement that textbook chapter with something else. Reasonably smart people can look at this with this evidence and you start saying, I think this would work, I think this would work. So you change the course and you teach it again and see what happens. That's what Edison did. And that's what you can do with your courses if you standardize them, align the outcomes and the assessments, and hold them to constant, and then have a way to collect the data. So that's the whole process that we're ready to put in place. So Matt's built the tools to track the data. We can help you build the courses and align the outcomes with the assessments, and you're ready to start collecting data and figuring out how the best way is to help students learn. And the most exciting thing that's ever happened to me professionally is when I put a system like this in place and you see the results get better. And student achievement goes up. And then it goes up again as you teach that course again. You can see what happens over time that you really can improve student learning. So, Anne-Marie, tell us where you are with, oh, I'm sorry. This is, you want to talk about your way through this particular course?
I'm going to let you because
okay.
you've used
I'm sorry.
this for your demo.
This is a course that we just picked as a model. So here's how the alignment process works. You have a course, in this case it was education research, there's some course outcomes. You can see about the graded assignments are going to go with it. They fit in the course somewhere, and then you've got these scores that come out of it. Well, the alignment process is just this. You say, well, this assessment measures this outcome, and this assignment in the course measures this outcome. And you want to pick the assignment that's the summative assessment. In many cases, you don't want to pick all the assignments that you do in a course and link them back to the outcomes, because you're teaching the material. That's what we ran into with Carlene when she did her course. She'll talk to you about it. You may have a series of quizzes. Well, it's okay for the students to fail quizzes early on. That's how they're learning about the material, and you're checking to see what they're doing. But at the end of the course, when that final project, they better have it by then. That's when you want to check and see if they really learned the material. So you want to be careful as you do this, and that's part of the decision-making process as you go through as the faculty member when you build your course. Another thing you can do is there may be one assignment that measures two different outcomes, and you can split them. Or if you have 3 assignments for one outcome, Matt's got it set up that he can average those, and it's a pretty flexible system where you can say which outcomes you want and how you want to weight them to measure particular outcomes in any course. So you should be able to go through every one of your courses and say, here's how we assess this outcome, this outcome, this outcome. Now, I've done this with like 1,200 courses with groups of faculty, and the first time we did it, guess what? There were outcomes that had no assignments. And there were a bunch of assignments that weren't linked to any outcomes. And they realized, we weren't real careful when we built this course in the first place. So that may happen. That's okay. You weren't thinking about this. But if you're really design this course in that backward fashion intentionally, if you start with the outcome and then build the assessment and the materials, it'll all align together and link up. But a lot of courses in your universities today, they're going to have all kinds of extraneous stuff in that course that doesn't really do anything with the outcomes and vice versa. So it's a great exercise to, in a sense, kind of tighten up your courses and your curriculum when you go through this alignment process. In some cases, it takes a little bit longer than others, but if you know that material into your course, it's a fairly straightforward exercise to do this. Okay, now we're ready for Notre Dame. And you tell us where you are in this process.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for having me. Whoops, I'm sorry, David. One of the things that we have done at Notre Dame, we are a very small team of distance learning. We have an instructional designer that's working directly with our faculty members that are creating their courses. Because we're a Quality Matters institution, we've always been looking at our courses to align with our outcomes, and the assessments are aligning. We also, in that development process, the resources that are being placed in the course, we're making sure that they align to the outcomes as well, because we know we can fluff up the course with lots of extraneous support material, but if the students don't see a direct correlation, they find no value in why do I need to use this resource? What do I need to do with it? Is it just there? So one of the things we've done in this process, working with this tool, the first step that we took, Dr. Kleinfelter presented this to me as the director. I took it to our VPAA. We also have a team of faculty members who are overseeing the assessment process for the institution, primarily in our face-to-face format of courses. And so the first question we had to ask is, do we have to use the same assessment tools and means to measure the online that we have to use for our face-to-face? The answer we've been given is no, we don't have to use the same tool. If we can, great, and down the road we may be able to. But for our online courses, we did not, other than in development, we have not spent time gathering data and seeing, are we really measuring and what are we finding in those measures to improve and revise our courses. So we vetted that with our VPAA and the assessment team. We then took that, or I took that, to one division chair so far. We have 5 different divisions. And so we are working with the division chairs now to share the tool, talk to them about what this tool can offer to the institution for the online courses. And then we're asking our division chairs to help us identify faculty. Some of them will volunteer, some of them may be asked in a polite way, please do this. We hope that those who volunteer will find it to be fun, exciting, not too much work. And the hardest part we're finding is in the development of the course. We have a master course philosophy. Some of you may have sat in on that presentation yesterday. So this is going to work really easily for us. We don't have hundreds of different courses by different authors and same course number. So we're working with our master courses. The syllabus that the faculty course developer creates, they have identified in the syllabus to the students what assessments are going to be measured in for which outcome. So our students even see that, because one of the course evaluation questions we ask is, did your instructor meet all of the outcomes? Most students, I know from my own experience, I would just say yes. I'm going to assume that I hope everything they made me do was measuring the outcomes, but students don't usually know. And so our faculty are identifying in their syllabi what outcomes are being measured and which assessments are measuring those outcomes. So that helps the student in their course evaluation and also working through the course. And then the second step we're taking that students never see, in fact, instructors of term courses probably never see, because they don't have to do this part, it's already built in. They're actually mapping, they're creating that map. The example that Dr. Kleinfelter showed was one of our education graduate level courses. And we did not drill down terribly deep, but we essentially said this assessment is going to measure this outcome. We hope in time that we will drill that further. For example, a quiz. We know which outcome it's going to measure, but we actually want to know which question went to which lesson objective then matches that outcome, so that we can really get deep in refining and revising those courses to improve the outcomes for our students. In the grade book, we've also looked at, some grade books are weighted grades, others, most of our courses are developed with 1,000 points in their grade book, and essentially it is weighting them, but the students can very clearly see what percentage of my course is really being measured by what assessment. And so in the grade book, we're able to make those connections pretty easily and then look at that data. We have not implemented any course yet. We are working this summer to identify at least one faculty. We've been talking with a faculty member, but we think that it is probably somewhat cumbersome, and because it's summer, many of our faculty step away for the summer. So we're gonna kind of take another route, and our goal is to implement at least one, if not 2 or 3 courses in different disciplines. We debated, or I toyed with the idea of us taking one program and working through that whole program. But as you may experience at our institution, when one division does all of it, nobody else gets to feel how that process works, and we really want, with multiple divisions, to have them experience that. So our goal is that we do this with at least one course, but we're hoping for a couple of courses in multiple divisions this fall, that we can gather some data. And because we go through this process, it's ongoing, every term our course coordinator is managing that master course. When we see this data and the outcomes, we can then go back into the course with the faculty developer and talk about what can we do to improve this particular assessment, or how do we need to tweak it, or do we actually need to change the assessment and use something different for a variety of reasons so that we can measure this outcome in a better way and produce better results with our students. So that's kind of the approach we're taking, and I think that's the part that we need to think about first, is how can we start this process, not just jumping in and here's the tool and let's use it, but in a process that we are finding our faculty, we are moving very fast, and so with this, if we can set the infrastructure and help them plan and prepare for this part, then actually using the tool is going to be a lot easier, and they're going to be excited by it because they're going to see some good results and then continue to improve those courses. So that's kind of what Notre Dame is doing.
You want to take questions or comments?
Any questions? I don't know if I'll be able to answer them yet. All right, I'm going to turn this mic over.
You're live, Carly.
Okay. I'm Carlene Sanborn from Friends University, and as David said, I've already gone through a course and put in my grades, and it was analyzed, but I'll start back in the beginning. At Friends University, we have a process for developing our curriculum. A program director, with the aid of his or her faculty, will identify a new course that may be needed or an old course that needs to be revised. The process is that they rewrite the description, redevelop the course outcomes, and it's submitted to an academic council ultimately. It goes through 2 or 3 councils. And once that's approved, then a faculty member or the program director will go through the process of developing the curriculum. Now, in this particular case for this course, the program director asked me to develop the curriculum for him for online. I had developed it for traditional about 10 years ago. So, and I'd done that for a couple of programs, so I did a revision on it for our online. I'm giving you the description so you can kind of follow through and understand what it was that we analyzed. We have our course description and then our outcomes. And our university is very particular. All outcomes have to be measurable. They knew Mr. Bloom when he was alive. So we're very careful about how we do that. Also, my doctorate's in instructional technology and distance education, so I've been the little girl sitting there since 1995 with this degree waiting for someone to come along so I could use it. But we have our outcomes and our description. The next thing that we look at is how are we going to assess those outcomes. That's that who, what, when, where, and why. We need to know what they need to be doing and how well they need to be doing it. And so the next thing would be our assessments. And we do those both formative and summative. And then, of course, we have to have our assignments, our resources. Once we have those developed, then we can map those to our outcomes. We also do our weekly assignments, quizzes, and in the case of online, we use the forums also for some of our assignments. This is the way I lined mine up. I have my outcomes for this particular course. There are 5 of them. And then in the center, I've listed my assignments. There's actually 6 assignments, and they're writing assignments in this course. The first 5 are formative. And then the 6th one is summative. It's comprehensive. It assesses all of those various outcomes. I have one that is based on some discussion forums, and it has to do with selection of technology and using technology. And so it's set up just a little bit different. So we just have summative on it. To help you understand a little bit further, this is a facsimile of the rubric that I use. For each of my outcomes, I have selected an assignment, and I have developed a scale for how well they need to perform to get excellent, or 5 points on the first ones, how well they need to perform to get satisfactory, and what I consider unsatisfactory. I need to give some sort of explanation to my students. My students are very inquisitive. Why did I get 3 points when it was worth 5? So you have to tell them that. With online students, it's particularly important because you're not sitting there handing them a paper back, giving them this explanation, and able to sit down and visit with them. If you have something that you return to them, they can look at it and they can say, okay, I did not quite make my problem statement clear. I need to clarify. Maybe I was verbose. Maybe I wrote a 2.5-page problem statement on this, and it was supposed to have been 1 or 2 sentences. They need to know why they scored a particular score. Now, on the formative assignments, I give them back to the students, and I say, okay, if you're willing to revise this, correct all of these errors, work on it, and turn it in, I will give you some additional points for the revision. They go through that, and at the end, they write their paper, they turn it in, and they get the points they earned at that point. That's the difference between the formative and the summative evaluations. This is the remainder of my rubric, and you can see the outcomes on the other side there and what they're assessing. And this is what my gradebook looks like. It's your Moodle gradebook. I set up the assignment Assignment 6, it's the proposal for research. You'll notice that there are no points. It's just simply no grade. And I have to do that because I'm not going to just give them 100 points for that assignment when they turn it in. I'm going to go through that assignment. I'm going to look at their problem statement and give them a score between 0 and 5. And so I'll use my subcategory for that. And I've labeled it 6A, assignment 6A. The next one would be for their research questions. Were they developed properly? Were they introduced properly? And they can earn anywhere between 0 and 5. And I go through the whole process. That way, Matt can go in with his tool and pull out that data, and he can analyze it, and I'll know how well each of my students did on each of those outcomes. And I also know in total for the course. Is that correct?
Carlene, can I add something here?
Yes.
When we first looked at Carlene's course, she had this rubric written for assignment 6, and she had a half a dozen criteria there, but she gave it 1 score. It was just assignment 6 for the proposal that was written. And so we talked about, well, one of the criteria really tied back to outcome 1, another one was really linked to outcome 2. So she just split it into effect 6 assignments to get to 6 scores, so she could tie it back to outcome by outcome and get a score for each outcome instead of just saying, what's the overall score on 6? It was a simple manipulation.
And the students really appreciated that being broken out because they could see how much they were earning for literature review as opposed to what they were getting for setting their word processor with the correct margins, setting double spacing, that sort of thing. They could see that they really needed to work hard on that literature review, and they really needed to use their APA documentation and style. Did that mean it's time for me to be quiet? But this has been a really neat process. It was fairly easy for me to do, simply because, as I said, our university requires that we have that description. They require those outcomes, and we have a program review at the end of each year, and there's a process that we go through, and we have some data that we collect, but it's not as good. I wouldn't want to take it to the bank and bet on it, but we did have a process. But this makes it more formal, and it makes it more usable. My way of looking at it is that I could use it if I were still a program director to improve my curriculum. I could look at it and see individual things about my students, and also help my faculty to improve in areas where improvement might be warranted. I could also pat some people on the back when they did a good job. To me, that's always important. If a person does a good job, you need to tell them about it, and this would help out on that.
This is also superior to anything we're doing for the on-ground.
But I can use this in my own ground, and I teach them exactly the same. Their outcomes are the same, their assignments are the same. And I actually use a Moodle that's just there for the traditional people to use, and they have the same materials that my own people have. So it could be used either way.
The next slide is your data. Don't forget that. I thought it was.
This is
Oh, shoot. We've got, we updated this presentation, but when I sent it in, it must not have got through to the people that loaded it on this deck, because Matt actually has the data for Carlene. So if you went back one, Carlene, hit the left arrow there. There's a score for each one of those 6 outcomes now. We actually have the data that was collected, and I think it was outcome, most of them were 93, 94% for across the students in that one section, but I think one of the outcomes was like 86% or something.
One of them was 86, and Matt asked me, what happened on that first outcome? Well, this was a very small class, and one of the young men had a death in his family. And he was absent for a couple of weeks, and it took him a while to get caught up, and I worked with him. And he had some problems getting his reference list in good order. But he made it through the class in good form. And but it did show up there on that. And I knew exactly what the problem was when I saw it. Now, there are other times when you might not be able to see it that easily.
Would you go to the mic, please, because they're recording this and they want to be able to pick up your question?
Is there an opportunity to link or drill down to see the outcome language in your program? In other words, does it say what you want the student to do, or do they go to the syllabus for that information? What actually you're expecting that outcome to be?
Okay, that would be a question for Matt, and I don't think we're that far along.
Do you mean on the feedback on the assignment? Does it say what the outcome was?
Mainly in her rubric. That's where I put mine. I put it in my rubric so my students see exactly what I expect them to do, and then my criteria talks about at what level they performed that, and that's how I score them. But back on your rubric, it just says assignment
Aim it that
6A, research problem, whatever. But where do the students see what you're expecting them to do?
On my rubric, when I set up my courses with each of my assignment instructions, they get a copy of the rubric that I use to grade them with.
So it's different
And-
than the one you showed us?
Absolutely not.
Not?
It is not. It is
Okay.
exactly the same thing, and I tell them, before you turn in your assignment, go through the rubric, use it as a checklist to make sure that you
Right.
have completed everything that I
Well, that's
expect.
what I'm alluding to. On the left side, where it says literature review,
They know every bit of that, the whole bit.
The question is, does it write out or do you spell out what outcome number 1 is?
yeah, what is your outcome?
Yes. I didn't
Okay.
have room on this.
Okay,
I was
so
trying
where is
to-
that information for the student usually? In there?
Yes, it would
Okay,
be. It would be
good.
on the rubric. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, okay, good, because that's right. Is there a link to that? How do the students
like
know?
We say outcome number 5. Well, I wouldn't expect them to go back to the syllabus. And look, no.
Okay, good.
They have to know those things.
Does the schematic you use, does it preclude end comments, marginal comments? Do they just get the score and then they come back to the rubric and say, okay, well, I'll have to go look for these things? Or do you offer them some
Okay, the
additional?
way I do this is not an exact copy of my rubric. I put my rubric together either in Word or in Excel. Then I save it as a PDF. Okay, now I've got blocks over here to the side, a column, and I use it as a calculated field all the way down. I put the score out to the side. Down at the bottom, I put a text box, and it can be 3 pages long if it needs to be. And I relate back to each of those items, and I tell them what you did well first, and then I tell where they can be improvements made. They get plenty of feedback. Probably more than some of them want. But yes, they do have the scores calculated to the side for each item, and then a total at the bottom for what they earned for the whole assignment. Maximum being 100 points in this particular case, and then they have the text at the bottom. It's important that they get that further explanation beyond what we have here.
Are you the only instructor for this course?
We try to talk other people into doing it. We just had one quit a couple of weeks ago, and I got 4 more of them, so we'll see. There are other people that teach it, and the way we handle that is I sit down with them and we go over the assignments, how I handle it, and if they want to change it, we just want to make sure that they still meet those same outcomes.
Where I was going, do you want me to step up to the mic again?
It would be better if you would for the video folks.
I think it's, and we use rubrics like this for many of our courses too. But I think what would be interesting on an institutional level would be to not just do the quantitative, but also to see that kind of qualitative comment per section to do those comparisons. Because then you might have two strata. You would have student evaluations, but you would also have this data throughout the course to track it on kind of a formative basis. Yeah.
That's an interesting question for Matt. It's easy for him to pull numbers. It's harder for him to pull text and to, keep that text in some kind of order. But it's an interesting thought, for sure.
For myself, I keep a copy of my rubrics for each one of the assignments I turn in for the whole course or the whole program of studies for these students, simply because this is just the starting point for their master's thesis. And I get the same set of students for the thesis. And I work with them throughout 18 months on that thesis. So I keep these, and we do have them on file.
You go to the mic if you want to ask a question, folks.
Is there accommodations to drill this back up to program, back up to university, and on to guiding documents? All of mine are tied together that way.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I can get the analytics that way?
Well,
I don't think you can get the analytics that way. That's a
Not-
good
not
question
from
for
this.
Matt. But
Okay.
we could add that feature if we knew what those were.
Okay, I've got them for you. I'm ready
Well,
to pilot.
we'll talk.
when I heard you say that the other day at the booth, I wrote it down and we added it to our list of things to do.
There is a way to do it, but I don't think you're ready for that today. are you?
We're going to take a few steps before we start running.
Yeah, I was knocking program outcomes there a while ago in my intro, but if you have program outcomes and you design your program similar to course design, you'll link every course outcome to a program outcome. So you can roll this data up pretty easily and aggregate it to say we do have a measure of a program outcome. Right.
We have it's a little more complicated than what I've given here. The university requires that each of the programs have their own set of outcomes from which they develop curriculum, and it goes on, it filters down from the university at the top level.
And originates with guiding documents
Yeah.
that are national and states.
And so, it could be set up to where all of that, you could drill through it and see it. But for right now, we just worked on the course.
So let's jump over to Matt here. Matt's built the tools now to collect and aggregate, analyze, and report the data. He's going to demo how that works.
Yeah, and I guess in full disclosure, I haven't built anything. I have several of my developers back here in the back who build things, and they haven't even built this yet. We're at the very beginning stages of this, and we're hoping to work with several of you over the course of the next quarter or two to flesh this out. So what Chad is going to show us here is a mock-up of what the user experience would be for building those connections. Now the good news is that you've already done, by the time you get to this stage, you've already done all the hard work. You've done all the heavy lifting. This is really just the very end of it, and it's built to work with the tools that you're already using. It's built to work with Moodle, and it's built to work with the Partners Portal. And we're having a hard time getting away from the PowerPoint. Do we have anyone who knows how the computer interfaces with the display? Dave, do you have some other thoughts you want to
You
share
know-
with the folks while we fix the technical problem?
Yeah, I can always talk for a few minutes. Well, somebody mentioned the example of online versus face-to-face. We're going to do a project with Barry University, one of our partners, where in this case the university requires the online folks to compare performance in a class taught online and on campus face-to-face. So they've identified a key assessment, one key assignment in each of, I think, 16 or 18 general education courses. And they want to run them kind of head to head with Teach the Course Now and see if online is as good as face-to-face. They're skeptical, and the faculty are not sure about this online stuff, and so they want to see real results. The students really learn something when they go online, you know. Well, it's okay. It's a good study, but we can use this tool then to take that one assessment and pull it and report back and show them how they're doing. We're hoping that they'll actually offer some of those face-to-face classes in a blended format where they put their scores in, and it'd be easy for Matt to use the tool to pull the data so we can compare. You could use this system to compare performance in an on-ground to an online class. And the next step would be to work with the online classes, not just to pick one assessment, but to line them up like Carlene did, so we're assessing every course outcome. I think it's a good way if you have skeptical faculty and administrators. If you put this system in place, you can show that here's how our students are performing on the online classes, and as you use it and they get better over time, you can show good progress. That's a powerful tool to be able to convince people that are uncomfortable with online or unfamiliar with it that it works and how you can make it better. So it's another application. So are you ready to go now?
Yeah, but
Can I
looks
ask
like
a
we have
question while I'm up here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We use a program for assessment for our program. Why would I want to change from what I'm already using, which is Rubrics, and they do reports for us, and change over to this program? I mean, what would convince me to do that, or what would be a positive thing?
It's hard to answer with not knowing what when you say we have a program that does this now.
We
Maybe you
use-
don't want to switch. Maybe it's something that really fills your need. If it does the same thing, great.
Okay.
But I don't. We could talk more about what
Okay.
you are using TaskStream
We're
or
using TaskStream,
for
but
an
it's
NCATE
hard
approved
because
program?
I do rubrics and things on TaskStream in addition to bringing
Yeah.
things to Moodle, and so we end up doing two things.
the big disadvantage of TaskStream is it's a separate system, and your faculty have to go out of it, enter grades twice, and
Right.
so forth. This is built into Moodle, so you could capture that data.
Are
Now,
you
TaskStream
planning-
does a nice job of going across courses,
Right.
and that's an interesting. You could, if you're doing an NCATE approved teacher ed program where you have some assignments or assessments that bridge 4 or 5 courses. That's an area that we haven't addressed yet, but we could. So if you're using it for that, I think that this system, if you look at it, would probably do the same thing, but save your faculty some time and effort jumping back and
Right.
forth.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
great.
you.
And that's a great segue. So this is our new version of the Learning House LMS built on Moodle 2.3. If you went down to our booth during the conference and saw it, this is familiar. And so built right into your Moodle, and don't go there quite yet, Chad, is a way to jump over and assign the outcomes. Now, just to set the stage, so you've done the heavy lifting already. You have a master course. You've defined what your outcomes are. You've put all your assessments in through the whole course across all the weeks. So you've done all the hard work. Now, in about 5 minutes or less, you'll be able to do the wiring necessary to allow all the grades that you give through the whole term of that course to all your students to magically get mixed around and assigned to the different outcomes. So you do that by clicking on this outcomes button. It identifies the fact that you haven't added any outcomes yet for this course. So you proceed with that. And we'll add an outcome. We have a screen size problem here. So we've typed in our first outcome, and through the magic of this demo, we'll quickly add the next 5 outcomes. So Chad is very fast on the keyboard. So now we've added the 6 outcomes for this particular course. And that's it. This is the beginning of the term. We've now put our outcomes into the course. We have all our assignments, and now we teach the course. Actually, there's one more step. We're now going to go through and map these outcomes week by week against the different assignments. And so let me just pause for a moment, scroll up just a little bit, Chad, so we can see this. So the way this interface is set up, we have, this is a 6-week course. Week 1, week 2, week 3, 4, 5, 6. We have a visual indicator here that we haven't assigned outcomes for any of those. And so we're going to now go into week 1, and we're going to define which of our assessments have outcomes and how they map. So this information is pulled directly from Moodle. These are the assessments or the graded assignments that we have in week 1. We haven't had to enter these because they were already in Moodle. And there's only one of these that's summative in this case. It's the first one. And so we're going to assign the first graded assignment to outcome 1 because that's what it measures. Okay, that's it. That's all we have to do for week 1. Now we'll go back to the dashboard. And we've gotten some feedback here. We have a nice little thumbs up saying we're done with that week, and we've got one outcome that's been assigned for that week. Later, when we're looking at our whole course and making sure that we've done the mapping properly and that we've covered all our bases, this is a nice visual indicator of how many different outcomes we're addressing each week. So week 1, it was just 1. I'm going to switch over to a different course that I have that I'm also teaching. And let's go to MIS 525. I've already gone through the process of assigning the outcomes for the first 5 weeks. So you can see there's one outcome there. We've got one outcome that we're assessing in each of those weeks. Now we're at week 6. We've got the big final summative assignment. There's just one assignment. And in this case, it addresses 2 different outcomes. It addresses outcome number 1. So we'll click on that one. And it also covers outcome number 5. Sorry about the screen here. So we've now linked 2 different outcomes to that one assignment. And by default, we've averaged them at, we've weighted them equally, 50-50. But maybe they're not weighted equally. Maybe outcome 1 is more heavily weighted for this particular assignment. So we have a little sliding bar here that we can drag the weighting to whatever percentage it is, and we automatically weight the other one to make sure it adds up to 100%. Okay? Then we'll go back to the dashboard at this point, and now we're completely done mapping our outcomes for this assignment as well. And then the students do their assignments through the course, through the term, and at the very end, we have access to a bunch of different reports, which we can get to by clicking the Reports button, which we're displaying in the Partners portal. And it's a little difficult to see this here, but scroll over all the way to the left, Chad, so that we can see the left axis. Okay, so here's our 5 different outcomes. This is the average grade that the class scored over the course of the whole the whole term. Scroll to the other side, please. So we can see in this one the class average was 75. We've color-coded the ones where the class average is above whatever threshold we set, and we've also color-coded the one where the outcome was below whatever our standard was. So this is an example of a report that you could get that shows what the average class grade is over the whole term, outcome by outcome. You can also imagine there could be a report like this that shows what the average grade was by outcome, term by term over time. That was what Dave was referring to earlier, where we can watch how the outcomes change over time as we improve the course. You can imagine a report that would have instructors down one side, outcomes across the top, and we can assess how each instructor did on an outcome by outcome basis, and the same thing with students too. And so we plan to develop reports like each of those when we develop this over the course of the next quarter or two, so that you can slice and dice the data by time, by students, by faculty. So I'll stop there, and we'll open it up generally to questions.
Can you differentiate between formative and summative assessment with this, or is it all summative?
This would be, it's your call. You could mix them together if you wanted to. If you're really trying to assess the overall performance of the course, I would urge you and advise you to just pick the assignments that are the final assignments that you were going to take as evidence of learning. But you could use this tool in different ways. If in some cases you'd mix them all together, you'd just get the average performance of the student in the course. But I think it would throw off a little bit the test of the course itself if you throw in the formative stuff with the summative.
So we're at that neat point in product development where anything's possible. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to hear from you, either directly to me or through Dave, how you would find using, how you would use this tool and what features you'd like to see in it and how you can use it to improve your courses.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, we're on a kind of a fishing expedition here, recruitment trip. We're looking for schools that want to work with us. There'll be some further refinements in terms of just how it comes together. But what we've learned from Anne-Marie and Carlene especially, we have a good basic tool that works here. And different schools can start using this now. You may have different purposes in how you would use it. Like Barry wants to compare on ground to online. But if you did this in a systematic way, you would start to be able to track each of your courses and see if they're getting better. If you flip to the next slide, Matt, or that's okay, you don't have to go back up the slides. What I was just going to say is courses are often, they can be considered like textbooks if you standardize them. A textbook gets better with age. I learned this from a publisher friend that a book that's in its 12th edition is a lot better than the first edition of that book because it's been refined over time with feedback and guidance. And courses, when you standardize them, go with the master course concept, it can apply the same way. The 5th edition of the course should be a lot better than the 1st edition. In this case, you're not just taking opinions and student satisfaction ratings and things. You're taking actual performance data. So you're getting better scores on edition number 5, but you got to think about this as a long-term process. It may take you 3 or 4 years to go through a couple editions, but over time that course will get better and you'll see better student achievement, and it's a pretty powerful concept to drive improvement across the institution. So you can take this tool and use it. We're anxious to work with schools that want to kind of partner, and we could work on collecting some of the data and seeing kind of a users group on what's working for you, how did you do it, what problems did you run into. Like Carlene ran into the problem of having one rubric she had to split apart, and it'll get better. So other questions, fire away. If not, it's getting late. We've been here a long time. If you want to work with us, give me your business card, or give Matt and I your business card right now, or send us an email, and we'll include you in the next round of development here and application. Thank you for being here today.